So everyone, hi and welcome to the engineering sync call. And Prasanna, welcome to you as well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. And I hope today we get a lot of information from you. So you can just start in.
All right, thank you. All right, let me actually present the screen and then we can get started from there. All right, give me 1 second. Okay. All right, can everybody see the screen?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, cool. All right, so this is going to be, I believe this is pretty much the last technical sync of the year. So I thought, it would actually be good to just do a very quick, super high level overview of the year, what we've done, and then we can sort of set the context there and what next to do, right? Okay, so first things first, I think we kickstarted the year with EVM, lots of EVM was just out last year, and then we had tons of fixes to be done. So the RPCs, there were a few missing. All of that was resolved. Blocks got issues. And then early in the year, tracing and subscription APIs, two large chunks. Implementation of that was done. Then immediately after that, it was token splits on EVM, which because of which stock splits, everything was sort of paused. So that was a very large chunk. So that was the next big one. And then we had token merge support, fractional split support. So this was actually on the DVM side. So lost 3 points out from DVM. I think it got included in EVM. Then we have token rename support plus pool pair renames. So we had some very old tokens, like let's say Facebook was an example. It was called FB before the transition to Meta. We didn't have full support for pool pair rename, so we were not able to do that. Now all of that is there. It's done. Community can anytime now choose to do the rename and go ahead with it. Then we have DVM incremental flow of time. So it basically it was something that just kicked in the last upgrade a month ago, so month to 2 months ago. So now we have a much more stable network where it averages out between 30 seconds to a minute. So that was some of the DVM stuff, and then more DVM stuff. We had static rewards, which basically now makes split no longer a large event, because usually splits are extremely operationally intensive because you need to prepare snapshots, optimize them ahead in advance, and we also need to handhold Ocean. So it pretty much takes an entire day for the team. But post static rewards, that's no longer the case. It's a complete non-event. If there's a token split that's coming up, you just set it on chain, forget it. That's it. That's all that needs to be done. So there was static rewards, and then on-chain CFP payouts. So that's been already done, but testing was done for that as well. Yet to be enabled. It's actually on the list to think that we can actually enable it before the end of the year. So maybe in the next 2 weeks. So post next year, we don't have to actually think about it. Everything is just automated. Then feature swap limits. This was also done this year, but we didn't actually enable it on mainnet. It's always been enabled on testnet. So this is also on the list. Both of these are something that we want to enable right after governance kicks in. So the enabling of that is also there transparently as a part of the governance repo. So that's there. All of this, I think we can actually take on next week and then just go ahead and enable everything else. Masternode efficiency improvements. So that was also done. People who are running masternodes, I think there's a massive cost reduction where you can actually cluster more MN keys together in the same node. So there's a lot of performance improvements there as well. And then consolidation fixes. This was completely community driven. Thanks to Kugi for that. This was a big requirement for DToken restart as well. Those are the ones that help pre-optimize snapshots at the moment, because that was one of the key reasons that we were able to just do a token restart without downtime. Otherwise, the downtime without pre-optimized snapshots, we were looking at somewhere like 12 hours to 24 hours for the entire infra. So we would have really taken everything down. So that was one of the key things. And then DToken restart, of course, is another large chunk that was completely community driven. Big thanks to QG for that, through the implementation and also operational updates as well as to what we need to do. And then that was a large DVM chunk, and we have more DVM chunk. We also did token ownership upgrade, token ownership transfers. So this was done on the last upgrade. Now token ownership can actually be moved. Before that, it was not possible. Token deprecation support is also there. Which token deprecation support, one of the key things to note is it will rename the token symbol. IDs will not change, of course, but the token symbol names will change. It'll add a end of life prefix EOL in the beginning. This is done to particularly intentionally to let people know that, hey, you're actually dealing with a token that has been deprecated, so they don't accidentally deal with it or mistake it for anything else. Then community governance, that's another large chunk. We'll talk about it a little bit more as well. But community governance, implementation of it on chain, the basic implementation is there, and to transition out all the foundation keys. Then parameterized time to speed up network. So that was the one thing on our list that was not done. It's about 90% complete, but it's not done. So at the end of the year, we're just going to leave it there. And it's, the PR is open and most of the stuff complete. So if anybody wants to take a lead on that, anybody's welcome to continue that and then see that through a finish next year. But it's not on the agenda for the year. Right now it's kicked out. That was one thing we couldn't. Then other smaller noteworthy things. I mean, there were a whole bunch of other smaller things, but just wanted to highlight the key ones. Port sequence auto is something that was added somewhere mid this year. And that is super helpful if you're a developer or if you want to run multiple nodes in the same machine. So you don't have to worry about figuring out the ports, all of that. You just set it port sequence auto, and then you do a DeFi CLI with the data directory pointed to what your data directory is, and it will automatically pick up the ports and automatically connect it. Authentication, everything is automatically resolved. So it's super helpful if you want to do multiple testing of multiple nodes. Then Mocknet improvements, that's also another big developer experience one. Mocknet was introduced sometime last year, I believe, but it was still always hacky, but it was a very key aspect of the core team's testing, because we start out with Mocknet, and then Mocknet is basically you can branch off mainnet at any point to be able to test on real network, on the data of the real network in a branch chain. So rather than relying on testnet, because testnet is often not as intensive as mainnet, because mainnet has so much data. For instance, stock spread is a good example. Token spread, you do it on testnet super fast, but you do it on mainnet, it's going to take hours. It's no longer the case, but those kind of testing, Mocknet is incredibly a useful tool. So tons of improvements that was done over there as well. So because now it's super easy, nobody needs to do anything, just run with the Mocknet flag, and then that's it. Mocknet will set up a masternode for you, and you can actually have foundation keys in there, and then you can actually just go ahead and do whatever testing you need. Then DB integrity checks and complete internal DB hashes. So there's an API called log DB hashes, because there was consistent. There was throughout the period there was always some corrupted snapshots that happened. Now with the DB integrity checks, you can just really quickly just check, hey, what is the hash of the data, and use that to now properly verify. So it helps all the way from infrastructure. If you're an infrastructure provider, you can use this to ensure that, okay, all the snapshots are actually consistent and there's no corruption. And if you're somebody who's running as well, you can just check in on, hey, what is the DB integrity hash? There are a whole bunch of different hashes in there. Not everything is something that's consistent across different nodes. Some are intentionally, due to legacy, it is not going to be consistent, but we still add it in there so that it's a reference point for testing. So those are smaller other noteworthy stuff. And then infrastructure is another part of it. Infrastructure throughout the year has been a little bit flaky. Depending on different pieces of time, there was a period where it was very flaky and it was just fixed up to continue on. But the larger fix was Ocean API being actually merged in the node. That was a massive undertaking that is now pretty much completely done. There were a few smaller bugs that happened in the last few weeks. I think that's also almost done. I believe some members of the community are already testing it. So if the recent PR looks, recent merges, I think yesterday was the final one that happened. If that looks good, then over the next week, we'll be setting another release. That'll probably be the final release of the year. And that should have Ocean API merged into the node fully. And then people can actually use that. So the effect of that is Currently, the Ocean API takes about 2 to 3 weeks to actually index. So if you do not have an existing snapshots, it's going to take you 2 weeks. I think is conservative. It's on a very, very really fast node with massive amount of cores. But if you run it on a typical standard machine, then it's probably going to take upwards of 3 weeks just to index Ocean. Now it's just going to take about 5 to 8 hours. That's it. Regardless of how much the data is, you actually, it's just DeFi that's going to index as well, and you can do it incrementally as well. So really great work from Jeremy in particular there. So even if you don't have, even if you can just use a regular snapshot and then enable Ocean, and in the next, it'll continue to serve things, and meanwhile it'll just index things in the background. So what is the effect it's going to have on infra? Just beyond the time. Performance is due to the way in which the early part of Ocean was designed, it always would spam DeFi nodes with plenty of calls, and that kind of just scaled up. We didn't want to, back in the day, the design was that, hey, you don't introduce any central caches or any central systems in between. Let it all just directly be served of the nodes. But that was incredibly inefficient because the nodes also did not have these indexes. Now, because the node itself has it, and node itself has inbuilt caches, so even without adding any sort of a reverse proxy or anything like that, it's going to be 10x to 50x more efficient, depending on how you run it. So the entire infra cost, everything is going to have a massive, massive reduction. Then decoupling some of Ocean reliance on some of the bots has also been done, and then containerizing DeFi scan, so it can be thrown in onto, because there was some coupling into some specific infra providers. All of that has been removed now, so you can just very easily run it. And then simplifying infrastructure. So that is still in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we plan to complete it. We've moved away from complex infrastructure, so it's easy for anybody from the community to pick up and run as well. So we are also unifying most of this and then completely simplifying it. So yeah, then the repo is also, already the infra is open, DeFiCH/infra, but it has tons of Kubernetes complexity in how the snapshots are done, how block scatter is done. The good thing is it automatically scales up and down, but we don't think the complexity is actually worth it for anybody to easily pick up. So we're just simplifying that massively. So it's a simple infrastructure, which you can still auto scale as you need, and costs are also going to be way, way lower. That's an infrastructure point. And then let's get into governance. So that was pretty much the year in review. And then now coming to governance, what we need to do immediately pretty much is right after the call, hopefully by the time that the call recording actually goes out, we have the DeFiCH/governance repo that's actually open. It's currently not open to public because we still need to edit a few things. But today or by tomorrow latest, that'll be there. So that is going to be the central point of convergence for everything related to governance. Right. So immediate steps, discuss with the DeFiChain Labs, announce your interest in the SIG general channel in Discord. I don't know if it's there or not, but if it's not already there, the team will create it by today. So you have that channel. That's more of a discussion on whatever needs to be done. It's an informal one. And then the DeFiCH governance is the more formal repository where every governance set, let's say, the negative interest rate or any DEX fees, anything that's being set, any feature enablement, anything is going to go through the DeFiCH governance repo. So it's completely transparent to everybody. Everybody can see it. And the SIG will also be involved there. Right. So immediate steps, just discuss a little bit with DeFiChain Labs because we want to just quickly bootstrap it with well-known and community members who have already been handling many of these things. And then the next cycle, it's going to be up to them to actually set up some basic charter and then figure out how new members are appointed, how people are rotated, all of that. But TLDR, first, just let DeFiChain Labs know and then announce your interest in the group. Then each SIG will be bootstrapped with SIG and then, so it's a SIG and then the name of the SIG, which is a channel. That part, I think due to formatting, it kicked out. But SIG and the name of the SIG, let's say, it's an economy SIG. So SIG economy channel, for public operations or public discussions on Discord. And then if needed, depending on your SIG, it's up to the SIG members to keep a internal channel as well, if you don't want to discuss, some of the noisy stuff in public, or where you want to figure out some details for the internal ones. Then add yourself to the SIG, and then the name of the SIG, maintainers.md file, and create a PR in DeFiCH governance repo. This is going to be key. So everybody who's a part of a SIG is open. Everything is transparent. And those are also what other SIG members will refer to as acknowledgement from the members of the SIG. How is this going to work? We'll get into a little bit more. So next steps after this is SIG will be bootstrapped immediately with well-known members. Then the initial SIG members will actually take on the role to define each SIG specific charter in DeFiCH governance. What does that mean? Okay, what are the role? How is let's say an Oracle SIG going to conduct itself, right? So, and then how many? Let's say there are n members. How many M members need to acknowledge something before it is considered as it has reached consensus, right? So the execution can proceed. So these are some of the basic charter is something it's going to be up to the SIG members to actually define. And then the SIG charter, basically just include here what's the purpose of the SIG, and then how it operates. And then also, what is the, if there is any time period where, let's say, SIG members keep rotating every 3 months, 6 months, a year, it's going to be up to individual, because different SIGs will have different requirements. So it's going to be up to the SIG to actually figure out how they need to operate. But the common thread is all going to be in the governance repo. Then, so how is that going to work? Let's take an example of economy SIG, because I think economy SIG is a simpler one. Where basic tasks are going to be more on the lines of, hey, you set negative interest rate, or you set DEX fees. So all of those. And then basically the recommendation is going to be, hey, formalize the members by adding yourself to the maintainers file of that SIG, a SIG folder in governance, make a PR there. Once a PR is done, once it's merged, DeFiChain Labs team will grant additional access, if any. Let's say economy SIG, I don't think there's any additional access, because everything is there just in public. Most SIGs will not need any additional accesses, because the whole theme of the rest of the half of the year has been to decentralize it. So there's not one central entity handling it, right? So everything is out in the open. So most of the stuff is public, but there will be some special cases. I think Oracle SIG is a good example, where you will need additional accesses, simply due to the nature of it, because you will have upstream APIs to deal with. So those are the ones that the members of the SIG will deal with. And so you'll just have, it's still going to be transparent, but transparently only those members get access to it, right? And the SIG rotates, whoever comes in will get access to it, whoever gets out will be basically revoked access to that, right? And the SIG members will also be given right access to the governance repo, so they can manage their particular SIG folder and then continue to add updates. So that is kind of just the high-level basics, and then let's actually take a very specific task, so we can kind of just see how it all is going to work out. The more general one, let's say specific task. Let's say the economy SIG is going to want to set interest rates or DEX fee for something. First step would be to discuss as needed in the SIG economy channel, which is your SIG specific channel. Then once everybody's in agreement, create an issue in the governance repo with the exact specific changes needed, which is going to be today the set gov height. That once governance is activated, set gov is not going to be used anymore. It's always going to be set gov height. So you're setting something always ahead in the future. So it's all transparently there in GitHub, and then people have enough time to validate it. If there's some mistake, then to kick it out. Things can always be revoked immediately. So there's going to be another clear gov heights that can be executed by any member of the execution SIG in order to revoke something if needed. But again, that the initiation point is also going to be the governance repo itself, right? So somebody comments from the SIG, ask for it to be revoked, and then the execution member, somebody from the execution SIG steps in and then basically revokes it, right? So you create a repo, you create an issue there, and then once the issue is there, the members of the SIG are going to comment with an acknowledgement or a negative acknowledgement as comment. And once you have M out of N positive acknowledgements according to the economy SIG's charter, So where you've sort of decided. So in that maintenance file, you get to the particular SIG gets to decide, hey, what is the MFN for us to have considered as achieved consensus, because this is going to be super important, because that's what the execution SIG will look at to see, hey, okay, according to your charter, you need let's say 3 out of 5 acknowledgement, for example, and then do you have enough 3 members who have acknowledged it? Once they have, then execution SIG member will just verify that and then go ahead and do the execution of that, and then that's it, done. Execution SIG is not going to be involved in the decisions of it, the discussions of it. Their job is to merely just set it, as long as verify the acknowledgement, and if the acknowledgement is there, just set it and go on. Right, so that's going to be just a small task and how it's actually going to be accomplished. Then, so that I think is pretty much the whole year summed up. There's lots of smaller things, but I think it makes sense only just to cover the large chunks. And so the governance process will, 1 or 2 days, we'll open it up, and then people can discuss in there, and then we'll also create the channels for it. Once the channels are there, people can have discussions on there. If you are going to be a part of any of the specific SIGs, please just advertise yourself in the SIG channel, and then so people know that who you are and who are going to be a part of the SIG. Cool. I believe that's about it. I can take questions or anything else from you.
So, big thank you. And I have around 4 questions. The first one is one I can answer myself, but it was submitted, so let me just answer it. With AlgoDUSD coming from DUSD loans being able to be paid back with DFI, could we just allow for a limited time to pay back DFI loans with DUSD? And what would be the implications? No, because there are no DFI loans, so we cannot just do it the other way around. But fine. I have 3 serious questions. Where are DFIPs prioritized? There are some that have not been implemented for years. There is a list of all open DFIPs with implementation dates.
Right. So I think this is there seems to be some kind of a disconnect in how a decentralized organization or a decentralized operation actually happens. Bitcoin is a great example, I think. So where if you ask for hey, where are the implementations on Bitcoin and what is the implementation dates? There's none, right? So there are the proposals which are there, BIPs. I think currently the stuff is on chain and then spread around in GitHub. I think we could actually improve on there. But beyond that, specific implementation is actually up to it's decentralized. The intent of all of the efforts this year has primarily been to decentralize. So what that would also mean is through governance, community needs to organize itself. And it's going to be up to individual people who wants to implement something to actually take on the lead on it, right? A great example of that is the D-token restart, right? It was something that was proposed by the community, and Kugi, as a member who voluntarily took the lead on it. And then, you had the core team support around, not just the core team, from the community as well, supported that on, how can we organize that? Everybody organized. But you do need individual owners for each of the DFIP. So there's no obligation for anybody to, if there's a DFIP that's approved by the community, to actually implement it, right? So community needs to actually just come together and say, okay, this is something that we need, and then push ahead with the implementation. So so far, I think that's also what we've been doing. But just the D-token restart is a great example of fully community-driven aspect. I personally like to think so, right? So if you think that, hey, you know what, we need a board, people are free to actually set one up and then experiment how it goes. But I would suspect that it's going to be very hard for anybody who's kickstarting an implementation to actually provide an implementation date for it, right? So is there something that's of interest for you? Hey, I would be like, hey, go pick it up, right? And then just put it on just check community interest and then see if there's enough interest. And if you're interested in it, feel free to take the lead on it.
Okay, good. Next question is, what will happen to the core devs at the end of the year? Who will do the development work, and to what percentage?
Well, this is another That's the whole definition of decentralization, right? So so far the work has been to how can we move things where anybody, regardless of any central organization. So the intent is now DeFiChain Labs is stepping up as an entity to coordinate these efforts, right? So now if somebody wants to implement something, the same way that there's been discussions that's been going on, D-Token Restart again is another example that I would point to, where just pick it up, say that, hey, this is something that I'm going to implement. So far at the moment, I don't think there's anything on the list of people that I'm usually involved with. We do want to complete the infrastructure stuff, simplify it. That's something that will be, and then the rest of the activations and some of the cleanup of, I think there were some of the funds and some of the bots that needs to be moved back. So all of those are things that's on our list to do by the end of the year. Beyond that, what's next year is, up to everybody to decide for the next year and then figure out where to go from there.
Okay, I just extend the question by the question from Christian with foundation keys. Where are they after the year?
So the challenge with foundation keys is once somebody has the keys, even if they have destroyed it, there is no way that anybody can prove that it has been destroyed, right? So, and if, let's say, even if something like that happens, and then at a later point, if in theory there was an abuse that happened, then everybody who was ever a part of the foundation key access will be pulled in, right? So this creates a lot of challenges for everybody, and this is not going to be conducive to actually easily rotate and move on. So the way that is the specific intent with which we created the governance model. So once governance takes over, all of the foundation keys with the previous founders who created it and whoever was part of that chain, that pretty much is frozen. And you move on to, you can actually, currently, once you start with governance keys, these are fresh new keys, where there people from the community are going to be involved there, whoever wants to be a part of the execution SIG. And this becomes the only way to set it. Foundation keys, the intent is not to use it at all going forward. But then we can't just immediately revoke it, because if you do revoke it, if there's a bug in governance, then you're kind of stuck, right? So that's the reason it's not immediately revoked. So it's sort of on a, let's time test it. Once everything is stable for a couple of months, then the simplest way is governance can choose to actually set a foundation key to a burn address, right? So then, because there's also a foundation itself, which can be rotated on chain as well. It's already live on testnet, but it was never implemented on mainnet because there was no clear plan on how to do it. Now governance actually sets forth that plan on how we'll progress as a community. So once it's done, once it's been mature, then basically just set the foundation keys to burn address if foundation backup is no longer needed, and then move on. Right, hopefully this provides some clarity on what are the different steps and phases in which we can approach it.
Yeah, good. Then I'm done with my questions. I hope the SIG Discord channel will be opened in the next hours or days, and we can have some discussions there. We already have at least 2 SIGs that are interested in taking over some responsibility. It's open already. Okay, perfect. And with that, thank you all for the time, and also for the people who watched the recording. Thank you for taking the time. Have a great holiday 2024, and well, see you hopefully next year, right? With that, bye.